Your goal is not in her.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tammy Jesuson, once again here with another Insight interview. As a quick reminder, Insight.Teens is a career development resource that my brother and I created to help teens and young adults entering post-secondary education who are struggling to decide what career or field they should go into. Today we have Mr. Ayodele, who will be sharing his career journey with us. Thank you for joining me here today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so my first question for you today is, can you just give us a quick background on who you are and what your occupation is?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. My name is E2-Ayodele. I'm what you call a technology consultant. In summary, I help clients fix business problems. So whatever problems they have, I try to figure out a solution, figure out what is the appropriate way to solve this problem. Some of the tools that I typically use are technology tools. And because I have a specialty in the area of cloud computing, a majority of my solutions have ultimately the resolutions relate to cloud technology. So solving HR type problems, payroll problems, typical problems that you have in business organizations.
Okay, thank you very much for that overview. So I just wanted to ask you next, what originally drew you to this field?
That's a great question. And the answer is rather simple: opportunity. When I was young, I had all sorts of ideas of what I would do as an adult. I think the one thing that stuck for the longest was flying airplanes. I wanted to be a pilot growing up, and I'm pretty sure many people want to be pilots. Perhaps your brother wanted to be a pilot. I have an uncle who was in the military. He was an Air Force pilot. And he was so cool. Every time he came over or I went to his house, he had all these models, military aircrafts. I just liked him. He was a cool uncle. And I thought that being a pilot would give me that sort of cool. So now that I think about it, I really didn't want to be a pilot. I just wanted to be cool, And I sort of conflated being a pilot with being cool. When I grew older, I found out that going to the aviation school was rather expensive. And my parents weren't able to afford me going to aviation school. Growing up, I grew up on a university campus. A lot of parents wanted their kids to be medical doctors. And I did face similar pressure, but I've been, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of times I like to make my own choices. And at the time, becoming an engineer was the next best thing. So I made a decision to go down the electrical engineering path, and that's what I did.
That's very interesting that you brought that up, because even for me, even when people ask me what career field I want to go into, they automatically assume I want to be a doctor. And for a long time, I thought I wanted to be a doctor as well. Until coming to high school, when I realized there are so many other opportunities for me, that I really understand that there's so much flexibility in what we want to do, and that can really evolve and change over time. So I think it's really important that you brought up that point. Okay, so my next question is, what is your general education that you have gone through up to this point?
Okay, I will respond to this question, but I wanted to address the one thing you had brought up. Flexibility can be a good thing, but it can also be a dangerous thing without guidance. There are many career paths and options available to people. I think it's very important for young people to get guidance from people who have made choices in the past. Some choices have hurt some people, some choices have been constructive. Ultimately, you should embrace this flexibility as it's a good thing, but you should also be careful about it. Guidance is definitely a good thing. There's so many options out there. You don't want to pick an option just because it's appealing or because it's simple. it's important to rank your options, to put your options together and evaluate what sort of outcomes these options present you. Now, going to the question you asked, what's my education? I mean, I went to primary school, we used to call it way back. My parents went to grad school in the UK, and I started nursery and primary school in the UK. At some point, my family moved back to Nigeria. Evidently, I went to secondary school over there. And then we just talked about this. When it was time to go to college, my dad had ideas about what I should do. And there was a lot of pressure to consider medicine as an option. But I was way too intrigued by electronics and how things worked, from games, video games, to television sets. And then I chose the next best thing. I have heard from friends of my father that if I had gone to college in America, that the way my mind works, I would probably have studied physics or something of that sort. But yeah, my first degree is in electrical engineering. At some point, after a couple of years working, I moved over to America to go to grad school. And I started a graduate degree in electrical engineering. But at the time, there were fluctuations in the economy, and I made a decision to pivot from a master's degree in electrical engineering to a master's degree in IT management. The idea is, at the time, I was already an engineer. Nobody would take that engineering degree away from me. And moving over to a different field just broadened the options for me. I could consider different employers. I have toyed with the possibility of getting a PhD. I actually just about started one in cloud computing way back in 2010. But the appeal of going to the marketplace and earning money actually kind of dulled that pursuit. I also spent some time at the Moody Bible Institute studying for a master's in pastoral studies. So that's the extent of my education.
Okay, I just had a question come to mind now. What degree would you say gives the most options to branch into different careers in the future from your past experience?
That's a very good question. Now, there are some degrees that touch upon multiple different areas, and there are some degrees that have the prospect of siloing you. Let me give you an example. If you studied electrical engineering, the chances are that a lot of people will look at you, look at that technical part of your skill set. People are unlikely to give you opportunities in the area of communication, for instance, or say investment banking. However, the engineering part of a lot of degrees exposes you to concepts like mathematics and how to deal with complex things that is appealing to people in the marketplace. So just to answer your question very clearly, some degrees, because of the content that you study, broaden your opportunities. They allow you to work in different places. So I think it's important to make a decision to understand where your degree choices can take you. For instance, it's unlikely, while it is possible, it's unlikely that with a medical degree, you'll end up on Wall Street. Does that make sense? Because the competency you acquire with that sort of exposure doesn't lend itself easily in that area. Now, engineering degrees can be very generic. Degrees in physics can also open you up to lots of opportunities. I found too that sometimes the way you stack up your education can be critical too. You can have a base in engineering, and on top of that, you go to graduate school and you put a more generic degree, like an IT degree. So you can always reach back to your past, assuming you were looking for a degree that focused only on engineering competency. You could provision your background, your engineering background, but the veneer on top can often allow you to do different things. So I hope that answers your question. Depending on what you want to do with your life, and in some instances, young people are targeted. For instance, you may make a decision that I want to be a genetic engineer, or I want to be an astrophysicist. There's no point beating around the bush and making a decision to first study painting and then study history. I think it's very important to be targeted, particularly if you've made peace with the choice. Perhaps you have family support. A parent thinks it's a great path. For instance, maybe you like music, maybe you like to play the piano or the violin, and you've made a decision that this is what I want to do. That's fine. If, however, you are still weighing your options, there is uncertainty, you have to be careful not to lock yourself down the path. And I know from experience, I have a friend who, a lot of my friends have PhDs. I have a friend who has a PhD in electrical engineering from Georgia Tech. And he isn't the happiest person in the world because the sort of education that he has sort of blocked him off to a certain area because his experience shows that this person's strengths are in research in a certain area. And it's good to keep that in mind, that a certain path, it's difficult to get off that path. To reinvent yourself may be harder. I hope I haven't complicated that answer.
No, not at all. I think one thing that I'm really taking from this and the points you've made is that there's kind of a balance, I would say, because yes, there's a lot of flexibility with things, and we should try not to narrow our minds and our thinking of what we should go into, but at the same time, we need to make sure that what we are doing is purposeful in a way and in relation to what we want to do or what we think our strengths are. So I think, no, that doesn't complicate things at all. So yeah, thank you for that. That was really
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, so my next question for you is going in a slightly different direction. And it is, what challenges have you faced because of your race in your current occupation?
That's a loaded question. And I'll do my best to answer. So yes, I do identify as Black, right? So that's my race, and I would have to argue that for the most part, in the beginning of my career, I've been very naive to certain biases. In the past, I've often felt that effort is sufficient. Effort is the resolution to all difficulties. But the way my mind works, I'm very good at picking up on patterns. I'm very forgiving of, single instances. If I see an occurrence and I determine that it's not a pattern, I'm quick to discard it. But when I see things and over time it appears to form a pattern, in lots of organizations in the country where we live, when you take a look at the top leadership, it's really an indictment on the firms, because it's difficult to make an argument that people like myself are uneducated or incapable of doing certain things. A lot of times the argument you hear is that, oh, that person doesn't have the aptitude or they don't have the experience. But it's a difficult argument to sell over 60 years of people like myself going to college in America or going to graduate schools. I mean, there are people that have the competency, that have the willingness. Personally, I've experienced challenges. Sometimes I've experienced difficulty, targeted difficulty. Sometimes it's people who, on the one hand, think that perhaps I shouldn't be where I am. I don't know. I've heard people say things to me like, "Oh, you speak very good English." There is a presumption that someone like myself shouldn't have certain abilities. Now I'm I can be nice sometimes, but I'm also used to pushing back. I mean, in a respectful manner, to help correct certain certain biases or certain persistent ideas about people. But yes, personally, I feel that if I were a Caucasian male, I would rule the world. I like the smile, but I mean, I say that with all honesty, and I should tell you a joke. One of my best friends is about 8 inches taller than me. Actually, he's my best friend in the world. So if I'm 5'8", my friend's 6'4", and he told me growing up that there's a reason God made you just as tall. That if I were any taller, I would rule the world. So or more aptly, he said I would oppress everyone in my way. If I can almost hear someone else laughing there, but please go on.
Wow, okay. I think that's really important. I feel like for me as a Black youth, for a long time, because of the community I grew up in, and just because of my age, I always thought that things were based solely on effort.
Mm,
Until I grew up and I went to high school and I started to understand the bias in fields, even starting from education.
mm.
And so I think my next question to you would be, what advice would you give to people of minority or people who have certain disadvantages going into the type of field that you're in right now?
That's a great question. Now I think an awareness is a powerful thing. Now I'm Christian. I don't know if this is known to you, and Christian scripture says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. Now there's a balance too. I'm not saying you have to know every single thing, but being aware of these biases is a great place to start. Now, it's a really, really hard thing to change people's perspectives, but being open-minded, being hardworking, I think putting in the effort is a great thing. I mean, it often hurts when you put in the effort and you still see that biases persist. But I'm the first one to tell everyone that you need to do your part. In recent times, I've heard things like you need to work twice as hard to get half as far. I really don't subscribe to that ideology because I'm a person of faith. I believe in the will of God for me. In recent times, I have become more and more patient. I'm not as pushy as I would have been, say, 5 years ago. But um, exercising your faith, putting in the effort. There is no substitute for actually um, applying yourself. This is one of the lessons that I've learned growing up. When I was younger and in before I got to college, I just thought going to school and turning up was the only thing required. And for the most part, it worked until the content started getting harder and harder. And then when I made a decision to apply myself, I don't know if you've heard of the term gamification. When you turn a challenge to a game, you give yourself points for advancing. So for me, I turned the acquisition of knowledge to a game in a sense. And I made a commitment to apply myself always when points were up for grabs. So every time I'm in school now, I do my very best, or even at work, I do my very best to apply myself. It's sort of fulfilling for me. So to summarize and to answer your question, I think that people of our kind need to know, familiarize themselves with these biases, recognize that biases exist. Don't be naive. Otherwise, it'll hurt if you had to find out 10 years from now that the game is rigged. Now, you also need to exercise your faith. Recognize that Christian scripture says that the race is not to the swift, nor is the battle to the strong. You need to exercise the fact that you bring in subliminal essence. You bring in the supernatural into the things you do. So again, apply yourself, recognize the biases, and I don't know that this advice is appropriate for everyone, but exercise your faith. Stand in faith that if there's an outcome that you have in your mind, you hope for something, you need to constantly hold that hope by faith in spite of whatever happens.
Thank you very much for that advice. I think I'll definitely be using that advice for myself. So thank you very much. Okay. My next question for you is, what important characteristics do you think it takes to pursue your specific career?
My specific career. Well, I think that the characteristics required to excel in my career are same ones required in any career at all. And I did mention applying yourself. I think applying yourself is perhaps one of the bigger things. Staying focused is very powerful. It's 2020 now, and the distractions in 2020 are significantly more than the distractions in, say, 2000 or 30 years ago. There's everything from mobile devices to, this staying focused is really, really powerful. The term laser, a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually an acronym for light amplification, blah, blah, blah. I can't remember. But essentially, when you focus yourself, you amplify your efforts. I think applying yourself, staying focused, keeping your eyes on the outcomes that you want is very powerful. Obviously, discipline and character. It's not in your best interest to aspire to things but not have character. Now, sometimes having character or discipline can rub some people the wrong way. Some people may think that you're too tenacious or you are rigid or whatever. I think also not caring too much about other people, what other people say, particularly if people think that you're too focused on a pursuit or different in a way. Sometimes I think it's okay to be different, particularly if different isn't immoral, if different isn't wicked. So again, to summarize, applying yourself, focus, exercising character, and yeah, that's about it. And discipline. And obviously, too, you need to have aptitude for what it is you're engaging in. You don't want to, like, I didn't learn any instruments growing up. I'd have a hard time if I wanted to be a violinist, if that's the day job that I elected. There's some skills that you can pick up easily, others not so easily. So, and there's some things that some people have aptitude for. Like, I would not be able to earn a living if I tried to sing, for instance, or to swim, So I think it's essential to recognize, to determine if or not you have aptitude. Mathematics, for instance. Some people that hate math, there are other people that love math. I think it'd be a really, really long degree for someone who hates math and they make a decision to get, say, an advanced degree in mathematics. I think you have to have a certain ability or certain fondness for certain things to excel in them. I don't know if that question that answer helps.
Yes, that definitely helped. And I think everything you said is really applicable, as you said, to a lot of fields, no matter what you're going into. And I feel like there has to be a degree of not necessarily passion, but the want to do something can take you very far in helping you to be focused and to be disciplined. And as you said before, you need to have that aptitude to do all of those things, because without it, you're going to struggle to find yourself being disciplined and focused in whatever you're doing.
You know,
Okay.
I was just going to add that, you know, and I could be entirely wrong here. Sometimes I think that passion is overrated, and I'll qualify this. I have a sibling who I would argue is the most disciplined person in the world. You know, he figures out what it takes to achieve an outcome, and he keeps doing it. He just perseveres. I think that perseverance is um, so much more valuable than passion. Um, I mean, passion is valuable too, but in this part of the world where we live, for instance, um, it's people often conflate perception of passion with competency. The one doesn't always equal the other. I think just diligently pursuing an outcome is really, really key. You know, and forgive me if I updated my answer, but I don't know if you agree with my thoughts.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. And what's really interesting is that even the person we interviewed last week, Mr. Mamora, also said that passion, I mean, it matters to some degree, but I feel personally it shouldn't be the driving force. Just because what we're passionate about, it doesn't necessarily equate to what we will be successful in.
Hmm.
And all the attributes you've listed already, determination, perseverance, diligence, those are what I think kind of create a fuller picture of what success and what a career should really be. So yes, I definitely agree with that statement.
Excellent, excellent.
Okay, so my last question for you is, if you could change anything about your career journey, what would it be?
Interesting. If I could change anything about my career journey, what would it be? So the one thing, the one thing that I've often thought about is my education. So I, a lot of people don't know this, but I'm the second of four kids, but I'm the last person to go to grad school because I finished college and I started a job. There was a lot of pressure on me to go to grad school to get a PhD, but um, I, probably shouldn't say this, but I like to make my own decisions. I hate it if I take a path, someone else prescribes a path, and then eventually I go down that path and I don't like the outcome. I like to take ownership. Now, this doesn't mean that I don't take advice. I do take advice, particularly when it's clear. But I, the one thing I would change is I would have got a PhD earlier. Now life is just so busy. It's harder to justify right now. The stage I'm at my career, a PhD doesn't do anything. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't do anything, but it doesn't offer me very much. So one thing I would change is I would have stayed longer in school, you know, because life happens. Life gets busier the older you grow. Back in those days, I'd never had to worry about a mortgage, or I didn't have to worry about helping someone with homework. My life is just so much fuller now, or I didn't have to worry about saving for retirement. Now, I use the word worry. I mean, I'm not in the habit of worrying, but hopefully you understand what I'm trying to say. My preoccupations have exploded now. So I think if I had to rephrase my answer, I would say that I would do more things when I was younger than now, because the bandwidth just narrows. You have less availability to do a lot of the things that you could do. So do more now. That's what I'm trying to say.
Thank you very much for that. And I think that's a really important point, that life and work, they can be a collaborative like thing in whatever point of life you are at the moment. But I feel, and I know personally, my life right now is going to be, and it's going to include a lot less stressors and responsibilities than later on. So really getting that education and doing everything to equip you to become the most successful or do the most later on, I think is a really important point to make. And I would
go ahead. I apologize.
no, you can go on.
No, I was going to say that I absolutely concur with you. And, you know, if we're speaking about you in particular, you know, do as much as possible, you know, don't, you know, and I'm not trying to disregard, say, a gap year. I've heard people say gap years. Don't take one of those. It's, I mean, in your season of life, my encouragement is to just go and go and go until mommy says, hey, I'm not paying for that anymore, you know? Just go and be the best that you can be. You live in the best country in the world. You have access to content and curriculum that doesn't exist in many parts of the world, you know? My spouse, for instance, has lived in this country longer than myself. And, you know, earlier when we got married, I would tease her that, hey, why didn't you do this? If, you know, you should do this, you should do this. So my advice to you is to make every effort to be better than not just your parents, but everyone in your orbit. You know, just go for it. Go for it, because the opportunity is there. You have the time, you have the bandwidth too. So just go for it. Go as far as you can, you know. And one of the pieces of advice that I've given people in the past, as far as career is concerned, don't focus on financial outcomes. You know, sometimes people make choices because, hey, they think this field pays more than this. I mean, at some level, it's a valuable consideration. But right now, I would focus on being the best version of you that you can be, you know. And, you know, scripture tells us that seek ye first the kingdom of God. So righteousness, peace, and joy. Do what is righteous. Do what is constructive. And ultimately, those good outcomes will come to you.
Thank you very much. I think that would be really good advice for me and to anyone else who's watching, who's wondering what to do at this point in their life. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming to this interview today. I really appreciated everything you said, and I think everyone else also appreciates it. I think the advice you give is really specific, and I think it addresses a lot of issues that run through anyone's mind who's looking to go into a career or to go into an education. So once again, I thank you so much. I appreciate you spending your time here today, and I'll definitely be inviting you back for a later interview at some point in time.
You're very welcome. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. Be sure to stay tuned to any new announcements we have. Remember, we'll be having an interview every single week, so look out for that on our Instagram. Also, make sure to follow our social media, and if you have any inquiries, check out our Gmail. And once again, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.